Okay, so today we're going to talk a lot about the textuality debate. This is also popularly referred to as the T debate, and we're going to talk about education standards. So, let's start with textuality. The first thing is you have to understand, Jack, that textuality is a question of was the aft topical? So the topic says something. It's usually a sentence written in English. And by usually, I mean always. And so the topic says right now that jury nullification, or the criminal justice system ought to use jury nullification in the U.S., or something to that effect, right?
Yeah.
If we read an aft that says the Los Angeles Lakers are the best basketball team in the NBA, would that aft be topical?
No,
Why not?
because it doesn't talk about what the topic is referring to.
Which was what?
Jury nullification.
Okay, so presumably my aft has to be tangentially related at least to jury nullification.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's the easiest and clearest delineating point of when afts stop being topical.
Okay.
Now, after that very clear line of topical versus non-topical, there is a huge debate that happens popularly in LD and in policy called T debate. So people will argue that the topic has a very specific meaning and that the aft that you're reading is not adherent to that specific meaning.
Okay.
So, in essence, they'll say your aft was the equivalent of reading an argument about the Los Angeles Lakers being the best basketball team because you're just not talking about the topic.
Okay. So how do you determine if your F is your F is topical or not?
That's a fantastic question. So, that's actually what we're going to talk about next, which is how do we determine that? So there's various standards that comprise the textuality debate, or the T debate. First is grammar. Second is topic literature. Third is source of definition. Fourth is etymology. And fifth is common usage.
Okay.
Those were not given to you in terms of order of importance. So don't take that as grammar is the most important and topic lit's the second most important, etc. Let's talk about grammar. I think that grammar has gained a lot of popularity over the last few years. And typically the argument is that some word in the resolution is like a noun or an adjective or an adverb, and the way that the affirmative is defining it or using it is not as a noun or adjective or as an adverb. They're using a different version of that definition.
Okay.
Other times, people will talk about the concept of a bare plural. So, for example, in the context of the jury nullification topic, right, it doesn't say jury nullification for a specific type of situation, right? Like, it's not jury nullification for nonviolent drug offenses.
Yeah.
And so, people will say, look, the topic says jury nullification, and jury nullification is a bare plural, which means that it doesn't specify anything, which means you can't specify things either, because that's not what the topic did. If the topic wanted us to talk about jury nullification for nonviolent drug offenses, the topic would have said so.
Mm-hmm. So then what do they say you should defend instead of specific instances?
They say you should defend the generic jury nullification.
Yeah.
As a concept. Or they'll say you can read arguments about specific situations, but you can't defend only those specific situations. So one reason that can be put forth in favor of jury nullification can be that nonviolent drug offenders are convicted right now at a scary rate. But that is not uh, an argument that you are allowed to defend exclusively.
Mm-hmm. So you can...
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh. So are they basically saying that you can gain offense from specific scenarios, but you can't defend a specific scenario?
Perfect. Yeah. That's a really good way to articulate it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, right? That right now, I think that debate is the most popular in LD, which is funny because that's just the same as the plans good bad debate. But again, these are specific debates that we will cover at a later time. Right now, we want to get a big picture understanding, a good background and foundation with theory standards.
Okay.
Cool. So does the concept of grammar make sense?
Yeah.
Now, how do you decide what is grammatically correct? Usually, people just decide in terms of they analyze the sentence, and English has very specific rules, and so you just see if you're meeting all the rules. It's like a checkbox, right?
Yeah.
Like when you turn in an essay to your teachers in high school, you don't tell them, look, 95% of my paper was grammatically correct.
No.
Right? It's an all or nothing. You're expected to be perfectly grammatically correct.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, you were going to say something. I cut you off.
No, I think you clarified it.
Okay. So when you're responding to grammar, the easiest way to respond to it is to say you are grammatically correct.
Okay.
That would be the most effective method.
Is that the only way to respond?
No way. So, the next method, which I think is also very persuasive, is argumentation along the lines of so what? Who cares?
So what do you say?
So arguments like, you say grammar, but grammar is only important in terms of predictability. The fact that this AF was disclosed and you're reading evidence against it in your negative speech indicates that you could have debated the AF. You're just reading T as a strategy, not because the AF is not topical.
Yeah.
Or arguments like, yeah, the AF is not topical, but it's still predictable. Or sorry, the AF is not grammatically perfect, but it is still reasonably close, and it is predictable.
So is there a bright line for when something is too grammatic or correct enough?
No, not really, right? That's the biggest problem with these appeals to reasonability, is that there doesn't seem to be an objective one. We can create one.
Yeah.
One that floats around quite often is a bright line of 7 minutes of link and impact turns in conjunction with the AF being predictable.
Okay. So then...
Cool. So
yep.
Topic lit?
Yeah.
Topic literature standards say that there either is an abundance or a lack of literature on your AF. So to illustrate the non-topical nature of your AF, a lot of people will say there's no literature. Like if this was a core part of the topic area, there would be literature in the academia.
Okay.
When the people who write resolutions decide which resolution they're going to write and which ones are voted on, a huge concern they have is looking at what the topic literature is for the affirmative and the negative. They're trying to ensure that the debates are robust and that the debates have the potential to evolve over time and that the debates have plenty of arguments for both sides and the debates are not too politically charged or emotionally charged and that the debates are relevant politically, but still politically relevant. right? Like, we don't debate history. Like, the resolution is never like resolved. Christopher Columbus was the first person to sail across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And then the negative is expected to argue that some Viking did it like 50 years earlier or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's never a debate over history. It's a debate over politically relevant events that are issues that are ongoing right now.
Okay.
And so topic literature is huge, right? Topic literature is literally how you find your evidence.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Yeah. So how do you just set like your own amount of how much topic lit should be considered? Then it should be considered topical.
Yeah, I mean, again, as you're starting to see every single time you ask these types of questions, my answer is there is no objective criteria, or there is no line at which is objectively there's been enough topic literature for you to respond to it. So, once again, the answer is like it's up to you, right? And that's simultaneously really exciting and awesome and frustrating.
Yeah.
So it's awesome and exciting because that means that we can get really good at this, and you don't need a huge team or a bunch of resources to be really good at theory.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating because oftentimes you'll lose debates where you thought you were being topical, you thought there was enough literature, but somebody else's bright line just wasn't the same as yours, and so you lost.
Okay.
Cool. So normally topic literature, the first question you have to ask is how much literature is there? So usually there's some sort of like benchmark, right? People reference the amount of Google Scholar searches or hits that show up. Ideally, they're able to reference like there were at least 300 peer-reviewed journals published on this app, something like that. Or like you could do something else, like if you're reading an app that is time frame sensitive, like let's have jury nullification in a specific case in Missouri that's happening as we speak, then you could read evidence indicating that there's like 300 plus Google News articles published on this every hour.
Okay.
Those are all just examples. I think by far the strongest method of indicating that your app has a strong presence in the literature is to find an author in academia who says so. Who says something to the effects of, the majority of the literature is on this issue, or there's a lot of literature on this issue. And normally you can find those in lit reviews.
Okay.
So literature reviews are a really great place to figure out or to find evidence for topic literature. So when we respond to topic literature, I think the strongest way to respond to topic literature is to literally just list out at least a half dozen examples of things they could have read.
Okay. Also, for the lit reviews, is there a best place to find?
No, if you just like search, I'm sure if you Google literature review on Google, on jury nullification, something will come up.
Yeah.
I think you and I at some point should have a researching session where I show you how to most effectively leverage Google.
Okay. I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, me too, because I think there's a lot of tricks that you could be utilizing that you probably aren't right now. For example, just real quick, we're veering off topic. I think the most important trick is to get really good at using footnotes within an article. So finding more articles from the footnotes as opposed to like having to go search through JSTOR or Google, etc.
Yeah.
But we'll have that conversation later, okay?
Okay.
when you're responding to topic literature, listing out your arguments is certainly the strongest way to respond. And the other way to respond is to make the intuitive, empirically denied argument, like something like to the effects of, duh, there's topic literature. I literally read an AF that had arguments from the topic lit, and you read arguments that were carded, indicating that there is topic lit. You were just lazy and didn't cut enough cards.
Okay.
Cool. Next thing I want to talk to you about is the source of the definition. So,
Okay.
Traditionally, sources of definitions can be subdivided into two categories. One is dictionaries, and two is experts. But I think that we can also add a third subcategory, which is like subject-specific dictionaries. So I think that there's a difference between Merriam-Webster's definition of jury nullification and some like legal dictionaries definition, like Black's Law.
Yeah.
So there are advantages and disadvantages to all three of these sources. Obviously, the more specific the source, i.e., if it's an expert who's widely cited and acknowledged as an expert by their peers on that topic, then I think that carries a lot of weight. Right?
So what would be, yeah.
This isn't like Paris telling you, yo, Jack, jury nullification, I think it means this.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to read like, oh, Kumar in 2015 says that jury nullification is blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I think that this is like the definition of an appeal to authority, but ultimately definitions are basically appeals to authority.
So what would be the reason dictionary would be preferred over like a peer-specific article?
There's a really solid argument for dictionaries, which is that they are more general and the topic was written generally. So they're more likely to reflect how it's used over a wide variety of contexts.
Okay.
Now, I want you to notice how source of the definition, etymology, and common usage are all trying to determine what is the most legitimate version of this definition.
Yeah.
And they just take different approaches to get there.
Okay.
So, source of the definition is important. I think that these debates don't really happen in depth anymore. I think people have sort of strayed away from this. And it's a place where it could be really devastating if you're very well prepped on the validity of your source versus your opponent's.
Okay.
Usually the debater with the better definition wins the tea debate, but that's not always the case.
Would the debater with the best definition not win?
So like, remember when we were talking about topic literature?
Yeah.
Like maybe the definition's not the best, but it has a lot of literature on it. So maybe even though the debater with the worser definition, I don't think worser is a word, but the debater with the definition that is not as good as the other definition can still win that theory debate.
Okay.
Or like maybe one definition is the best, but is grammatically incorrect, or grammatically incoherent, or just like misapplied. Like maybe you're using the noun version of it as opposed to the adverb version, or the adjective version.
So it just depends on the situation.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of responding to this, I feel like it's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you need a counter definition.
Could you ever just give a counter definition with no source?
You definitely can. I've seen it done, but it's going to put you in a really unpleasant position if they're good at debate.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I would just annihilate you if you did that with me.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of hard to argue.
Right. It was just like, so, we are faced with a very difficult decision. Do we take this 11th grader who doesn't have a high school degree's opinion on what jury nullification means, or do we take this professor who has published 40 articles on this and has a PhD and a postdoc and has been studying it for most of her life? His opinion on this.
Yeah. It would be a pretty easy decision.
Yeah, I think so too. So once you have your counter definition, and you should have a definition for your AFs. I don't think it's really going to be an issue for you yet until we get a little bit more advanced and we start reading specific plans.
Yeah.
Cool. The next standard I want to talk about is etymology. Etymology looks at the origins of the word. I don't know if you know about this resource, but there's a free etymology dictionary. It's called the Online Etymology Dictionary.
Okay.
The OED is really fantastic. For example, it defines ought as an obligation.
Yeah.
So if somebody defines ought as desirability, you could cite the OED to say, look, etymologically, ought is certainly not a question of desirability. It's probably a question of obligations. And maybe we have an obligation to make things desirable, but that's a secondary question. That's not the prior question.
Yeah. Do people define ought as or something different than moral obligation frequently?
No, but it's done with enough frequency that we should definitely you should definitely be aware of it.
Yeah.
Cool. So people say etymology is important because it informs predictability. And it also informs the question of, like, semantically, who's correct.
So, would etymology a lot of the times come before something like, well, come before a lot of the other issues?
I don't know, man. There's really no, like, clear pecking order in terms of what comes first, what comes second.
Yeah.
Everything can be argued.
Okay.
What I can tell you is I think that the etymology to predictability link is really weak and tenuous. When you hear words, is your first thought, I wonder how they used it in 1500 British English?
No.
No, right? You probably don't even care.
Yeah. What do you think would be a stronger link to etymology?
Definitely semantics. I would impact etymology to semantics, not fairness.
What would you say when people impact it to predictability? Just that we don't care about?
Well, I would just say this seems to be, like, if someone impacted it to predictability, I would say there's no impact here. We have other metrics for predictability that seem to be far more pertinent, right? The fact that there's topic literature and there's an author living now, not in 1500 British English, who says that this is what the topic says probably means that you should give me significantly more leeway on these arguments than you give them.
Okay. And then how do you respond to etymology?
Well, you either need to just say, so what, no impact, don't care, next. Or you need to provide a counter etymology. Or you can weigh and say, look, even if this is not the most etymologically correct starting point. The point of language is that it evolves over time.
Okay.
Like, I
What
can
would
give
you
you an
do?
example, right? In Old English, the word gay means happy.
Yeah.
But in colloquial English now, if you say something is gay, usually you're trying to put down people who identify as homosexual.
Yeah.
And so it is, I think, fair to say that that word has changed meanings over time.
Okay.
I think that's reflected in how people use the word. So even
Yeah.
if the etymology was something different, it seems to be irrelevant. Etymology sort of seems to just be for um, like linguistic geeks and nerds,
Yeah.
like people who really geek out over the origins of a word, right?
hmm What is etymology mainly used for?
Etymology is used when you're doing like linguistic analysis on the evolution of a language. Like if we wanted to look at how Hindi has evolved from 1500s to now, and we want to look at the various influences, like maybe the hypothesis is that the Mughal invasion and the British invasion changed very specific parts of the Hindi language. And so what we would do is we'd analyze etymology. We'd probably pick a time period prior to the invasions, a time period during the invasions, and then a time period after the invasions, and we'd see if there's any observable difference, and if that difference is significant, and if there are alternate causes that explain that difference, or if it was the invasions that explain it.
Okay. For etymology, when you're talking about common usage, is there any empirical data that you need to provide, or would it be best to do that?
For etymology or common usage?
Common usage.
Let's get to common usage in a second. I want to wrap up etymology first.
Okay.
Do you have any questions on etymology?
No.
Cool. Then we can go to common usage. So, as you just heard with the example of the word gay, common usage seems to trump etymology when we're thinking about what does a word mean.
Yeah.
It seems like words get meanings by how they're used.
Yeah.
So another example that is not really politically relevant, but I think is an insightful example, is the word dude.
Yeah.
I have female friends who I'll sometimes casually refer to as dude.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that I think that they are not that they don't identify as female, and that I think that they look or identify as men.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that word has seemed to sort of change meanings and has adopted a commonly used definition.
Yeah. Also, a lot of times people can call like a group of people, whether it be guys or girls, just guys.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's another good example. I think another good example is the word cool.
Yeah.
In older English, or like in the olden days, which I guess was like not even like 30, 40, 50 years ago, the word cool was primarily used to describe the weather outside.
Yeah.
Now, cool is sort of like a personality trait. Like that person is really cool.
Yeah.
So, how do we determine common usage? Well, you and I seem to be subject matter experts on common usage in our particular communities.
Yeah.
So, I seem to be a subject matter expert on common usage in uh, college communities, and you seem to be an expert on common usage in high school communities, at least in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I think that it is very rare to find evidence indicating that this is the most commonly used way the word is used. Sorry, that made no sense. That this is the most commonly used version of the word.
Yeah. Does Google have something that does that?
It might.
Yeah. So I think sometimes when the word is searched up, maybe it just shows like how much the word is used currently, as opposed to like in a while ago.
Say that again?
Oh, I said like sometimes on Google, it gives a graph
Yeah.
of when the word's used now and its frequency, and then before. But I'm not sure how if that's to like a specific usage of the word or just the word in general.
Yeah, I think that that's something that you could probably Google to find out. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure Google has put up a methodology, or at least an explanation.
Yeah. So what were you saying about common or common usage experts?
I was saying you and I are experts, but I was saying normally people are not like. It's sort of hard to say this is definitively the most commonly used version of a word.
Yeah.
Cool. So, common usage seems to be also quantifiable based on the case wiki,
Yeah.
right?
How would you determine common usage from the case wiki?
Well, it seems like if a bunch of people are reading AFs that indicate we should let people have the right to physician-assisted suicide, then uh, it's probably uh, like a word. Yeah, it's probably a word that is being used at least commonly in the debate context.
Yeah. How do you respond to common usage?
So first, I would say mine is commonly used, and I would cite either the case wiki or just like an appeal to, I guess, intuition. Second, I would ask, why does common usage matter? If there's topic literature on the issue and it has good ground, does it really matter that it's not commonly used?
Okay. So are those the main ways to respond to common usage?
Yeah, typically. I think the other thing is common usage seems to be important for predictability, so you can just hijack that link using other metrics.
What would be an example
So, like, you
of that?
say my app uses the definition of the word medical, and that my definition is not commonly used. But the only reason we care about common usage is in terms of predictability. Given that literally 50 plus debaters have disclosed this type of app on the case wiki, this app is clearly predictable, and there's also a ton of literature on it, which means that even if it's not commonly used, there's no predictability deficit. So I can bite the link, and there's no impact.
Okay. So what's the next main standard for topicality?
Um, That's it. We just got to the end of our analysis. I think the other big argument that people make is ground.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that would be the other argument.
Okay. What would you say for ground?
Just like your version of the topic is either awful ground or great ground.
Yeah. So are we gonna do more education based?
Yeah, we were going to transition to education. I was just giving you a minute to see if you had any questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Let me know when you're good to transition.
Yeah, we can transition.
Cool. All right, let's talk about education. So, the standards in education that I want to discuss with you are clash, topic education, depth, breadth, real world education, philosophy education, and policy education. I guess we should also add advocacy skills to that list. That's a new standard that has become more popular in the last 2-3 years.
Okay.
Cool. So I think the easiest place to start with this analysis is to just group together topic ed, real world ed, phil ed, and policy ed.
Okay.
So what is common about all 4 of these?
They all talk about some sort of education relating to the topic.
Relating to the topic or relating to debate?
Relating to debate.
Right. So all 4 of these seem to have pinpointed different aspects of what makes debate educational. Right?
Yeah.
So debate seems to be educational because it teaches us philosophical education. It doesn't teach us education. It gives us a philosophical education. It seems to be educational because it teaches us how to think like policymakers. It seems to be educational because it teaches us about topics.
Yeah.
And it also seems to be educational because it teaches us about the real world, right?
Yeah.
So the way that these arguments work is they say that some strategy or argument that your opponent is making is harming that type of education.
Okay.
And they say that type of education is crucial. So let's go through and quickly identify the relevant parts of that education. Like what makes that education, like how would you link into each of those types of education? And then let's discuss strategies for defeating the 4 of them.
Okay.
So, topic education is not really commenting so much on which aspects of the topic, but rather just whether you're going to discuss the topic at all. So, this is most obvious in debates where the AF is not trying to debate the topic or is arguing that we shouldn't have a framework debate and we should just use theory to decide the winner of the framework. It seems like there is either an increase or decrease in the amount of time we spend discussing the contention.
Yeah.
So the way you quantify topic debate, the place it happens in debate is at the contention level.
Okay.
So strategies that incentivize clash at the contention level would probably increase topic education. strategies that decentivize clash at the contention level would probably hurt topic education.
Okay. So how would you link into this?
So I would just say something like, I think it's quite simple, right? I would just say, look, like their strategy, they're reading a necessary but insufficient burden, and that kills topic education because they are distracting us with a topic independent meta issue, like whether or not truth can ever exist, and that has nothing to do with jury nullification.
Okay. And then how would you respond to this?
So let's deal with responding to it all together with all four of them.
Yeah.
Cool. The next type of education I would like to discuss is real world education. Real world education is a little bit weird because what is the real world? Right? Like, it seems like there's no such thing as like a fake world or alternative world.
Yeah.
So the argument just usually takes the form of, oh, some strategy you're doing is not has not increased education that you can actually use in your real life.
So how would you be taking away from real world education?
So either you're like hurting critical thinking, or you are you are yeah, that's usually the biggest one. You're hurting critical thinking, or you're promoting practices that will never, or you're having conversations that will never happen in the real world, things like that. This is a really wacky standard. I'm not a fan of this at all. I think it's really dumb.
Yeah, it seems a little bit confusing.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest question is like, what is the real world?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Cool. So let's move to philosophical education. This is pretty straightforward. It's the opposite of topic education. At some level, they seem to clearly trade off, right?
Yeah.
Time spent on framework is time you're not spending on the contention, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how that works, and it's a really, really straightforward analysis.
Yeah. So when do you yeah.
So, the one thing you should understand is that it's not necessarily always a trade-off, because it seems like there could be some philosophical conversations that help with the topic.
Yeah.
So it seems like philosophy might ground the context in which we understand the topic.
Yeah.
Cool. The last type of education in that category is policy education. Policy education is obviously specific to learning how to be a policymaker. So the types of conversations that help with policy type education are probably like util debates.
Okay. Do people say a lot of times that util debates harm the philosophy education, even if you are talking about like utilitarianism?
Yeah, people usually say util trades off with phil ed because when we have util debate, we're not discussing the phil anymore. Phil being philosophy.
Yeah. So is policy education only in util?
That's debatable, but predominantly it's characterized as such. I'm not sure I agree with that completely, but yeah, it seems to be the biggest source at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do people ever say that, like, policymakers shouldn't decide their decisions based on, like, util calculus, and thus they're still talking about policy education in some way?
Yeah, people can do that. I don't think it's a very popular strategy right now, but it certainly could become more popular. It sounds like a reasonable form of argumentation to me.
Okay.
Cool. So when you're responding to these 4 categories of arguments, the first thing is to say you don't harm it. Deny the link. There's still Phil Ed in my world. There's still Topic Ed in my world. There's still Policy Ed in my world. There's still Real World Ed in my world.
Okay.
Second is identify the relevant trade-off. If you kill Policy Ed, they probably are not doing too hot on Phil Ed.
Yeah. And then would you also weigh between different types of education?
Exactly. So people weigh in terms of what is the constitutive nature of debate. People say the point of debate is to learn philosophy, that this is a values debate. Other people say we have a topic for a reason. Learning about the topic is time sensitive. You can learn about philosophy and about policy in college. You can't really learn about this topic anymore in college, or at least you won't have an incentive to.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yep.
The other thing I think you can do is, even if your denial of the link is just, oh, there's still some topic ed, I think you can phrase that very powerfully, right? Because it seems like the link differential there between how much of a link you have into topic ed and how much of a link your opponent has into topic ed is really not that huge anymore.
Yeah.
Like, what you're doing is probably problematic, no pun intended, for debate if there's no more discussion about the topic. It seems to kill one of the most basic foundations of Lincoln Douglas debate, which is a discussion over the topic.
Yeah.
The unwritten assumption is that debates will be about the topic. That's why you research and prepare for it.
Yeah. Do people ever run, like, theory violations just based on, like, if your position talks too much about philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, there's, like, theory arguments that have been written and run saying philosophy bad.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty extreme form of an argument. And really, you should only resort to that when you think your opponent's going to kill you on the philosophy debate.
Okay. Do people regularly run that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most popular version of something similar to that would be called this argument called AFC. That's called affirmative framework choice. So it says that there's no philosophy debate anymore. The AF just gets to choose the philosophy by virtue of being the AF.
Yeah.
And the constraint is that framework that the AF chooses needs to be fair.
Mm-hmm. Is there also affirmative contention choice?
Yeah, affirmative contention choice is also a thing. Definitely.
What would that look like?
It says AF gets to choose. AF automatically wins the contention level debate under whatever philosophy they choose. So the entire debate is just over philosophy.
Okay. Are those both popular approaches?
I don't know about popular. They're certainly prevalent enough that you and I will spend significant time discussing them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, cool. So, I think this is a great place to sort of have a natural break because we're approaching the end of this session. So next time we'll finish up with clash, depth, breadth, and advocacy skills, and then read you some theory shells and have you start practicing responding to them.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to email you a list of theory shells that have been written by good debaters in the past, so that way you can get practice and comfort reading the rhetoric.
Okay.
Cool. Do you have any questions about the topic, the conversation today about topicality debate and about the education standards?
No.
Cool.